Tidepool by Nicole Willson, published by the Parliament House, 2021. In 1913, Henry Hamilton disappears while on a business trip, and his sister, Sorrow, won't rest until she finds him. Defying her father's orders to remain at home, she travels to Tidepool, the last place Henry visited. Residents of the small, shabby, oceanside town can't quite meet Sorrow's eyes when she questions them about Henry. When corpses wash up on shore looking as if they've been torn apart by something not quite human, Sorrow is ready to return to Baltimore and let her father send in the professional detectives. Then she meets Miss Ada Oliver, a widow whose black silk dresses and elegant manners set her apart from the other Tidepool residents. After a terrifying encounter involving Miss Oliver, Sorrow discovers Tidepool's dark, deadly secret, and the town's denizens, human or otherwise, are hell-bent on making sure she never leaves. Atmospheric, riveting, and frightening, Tidepool is a must-read Lovecraftian dark fantasy for those who pursue the truth, no matter the personal cost. I'm beginning to find that I really enjoy period pieces, and the 2022 Bram Stoker Award nominee Tidepool by Nicole Willson was no exception. This was a fun, engaging read that skirts the lines between gothic fiction and horror. There were some heavy Lovecraftian vibes and inspiration behind it, but while reading it, I couldn't help but picture it playing out as a Tim Burton film in my mind. It was an oddly satisfying combination. The imagery the book gave me was very reminiscent of Burton's Sleepy Hollow film. The story is set in the early 1900s on the northeastern coast of the U.S. Henry Hamilton is a young real estate developer on the lookout for the next Atlantic City or Ocean City. He sets his sights on the small coastal town of Tidepool and travels there to try to engage the locals on his new proposition. When he arrives, though, his aspirations are quickly dashed. He states that Tidepool looks like the kind of place where people went to die, not live. It took only a day to walk around the whole town, and Henry is on the verge of writing his travels off at a loss, but then he meets Miss Ada Oliver. Unlike the rest of the locals he's encountered, Miss Oliver has an eccentric air about her. More to Henry's liking, though, she is a wealthy widow. In a last-ditch effort to save his plans, he quickly comes up with a plan to seduce the widow into investing in his ventures. Things quickly go from strange to eerie, from creepy to downright foolish for Henry, but his desire to land the deal and impress his business partners and father push him into going against his gut feelings, which ultimately lands him, missing. All of that is just the first chapter. The rest of the story follows Henry's sister, Sorrow Hamilton. No one has heard from Henry for about 2 months, and Sorrow is fearing the worst. She desperately wants to go searching for her brother in Tidepool since it's the last known location Henry was at, but her father forbids it. He's already hired private investigators, and besides, one child is already missing. He doesn't want to be worried about 2. Of course, Sorrow is headstrong and already set on searching for herself. She feels the connection she has with her brother will give her a little more advantage than any other investigator would have, so she leaves her father a note and secretly heads out for Tidepool early in the morning before her father wakes and can stop her. Naturally, that was a bad decision. But characters making bad decisions is what gives us good stories, right? Sorrow quickly finds herself caught up in a town of locals that want nothing to do with outsiders, and the strange widow and her eccentric brother keep Sorrow's nerves on edge the entire time. It becomes obvious rather quickly for Sorrow that the people there know more than they're letting on about the fate of her brother, so Sorrow decides to leave and inform her father of her findings. That would have been the best thing for her to do, but a friend and business associate of her brother shows up, being sent by Sorrow's father to find her and bring her home. The man named Charlie is also still set on closing Henry's investment deals in Tidepool as well, so he convinces Sorrow to stay one more night to give him time to meet with the mayor. That may seem a bit cold, but Charlie is convinced that Henry made connections in Tidepool, then moved on up the coast in search of other locations. Poor Charlie. His business sense overclouds his common sense. He should have listened to Sorrow. That was the first of many scenarios that prevent Sorrow from leaving Tidepool when she tries, and things just get stranger and stranger from that point forward. I say the story skirts between gothic and horror because the dread is always looming in between the lines of the story, but it's a slow burn up to a big reveal. Maybe more like a gothic mystery with heavy horror aspects. I'd stop short of calling it full-blown horror, but the strong Lovecraftian vibes of this story cannot let horror be completely counted out. The mystery aspect is pretty obvious to figure out from the blurb itself, but the build-up is still enjoyable even though you're pretty sure where it's heading. I mean, let's be truthful here. That's what sets horror apart from other true mysteries, right? We know what we're getting into with a story, and we push on anyway because it's just so damn fun. The writing is great. The story itself, although heavily influenced by Lovecraft, reads in an easy flow, not clunky and overly wordy like Lovecraft himself. The writing has a modern feel and flow to it, but the dialogue is superbly done to keep the early 1900s feel to it. That was one of the most surprising things for me as far as the style of the book. The modern feel of the writing versus the period style of the dialogue. Most books seem to either go 100% in one way or the other, but Nicole Willson has mixed up the two in a great, easy-to-read kind of way. The characters are also very well done. Sorrow is an educated woman for the times, therefore her confidence pushes her well beyond what other characters in the book would expect from her. Her pompous, lofty attitude is a great contrast with the seedy locals of Tidepool, and although Sorrow is hell-bent on getting the information she's looking for, her confidence always seems to crumble when confronted by Miss Oliver. Miss Ada Oliver was truly a great character. I mentioned earlier about visualizing this as a Tim Burton film, and that was only cemented in my mind when this character was introduced. The character of Miss Oliver is tailor-made for Helena Bonham Carter. Her speech patterns, her mannerisms, even her expressions reminded me so much of some of Helena's performances that I saw her as Miss Oliver throughout the whole read. I can see this book being appealing to a wide audience. Fans of Lovecraftian lore, horror fans, gothic fans, historical fiction or period piece lovers. There's something for almost everyone in this book. I don't regret reading Tidepool at all. This book would definitely be one that I would revisit if the mood for the atmosphere of this book pulled at me. I'm not one to reread many books, so for me that's saying something. I know it's only March, but Tidepool by Nicole Willson is by far my favorite read of the year so far. There you have it. I finally managed to produce a new book review. I appreciate everyone bearing with me lately. Now, on to the next read. Until then, grab yourself a good book and enjoy a break from reality.